There are 3 items within the closed session, and we can speak to 2 of them, probably take 15 or 20 minutes for those 2. The last one requires some folks that are not here. But we could certainly do that.
And how long is the presentation? Without question.
I'm sorry, Bob.
He's on.
Are we on?
Okay.
I'll forget
Moving forward.
That was a good idea.
Moving
That was a
forward.
good idea. All right. Well, thank you, Bob. I apologize to anybody that tuned in at 5:30. We had some technical difficulties, but they appear to be resolved. The purpose of the work session this evening is to provide a general overview of the issues that we see both from a revenue and expenditure standpoint as we begin to develop the budget. This doesn't take the place of either the city manager's budget or your work, but it's simply designed to start the conversation by sharing with you what we see at this point. From a revenue, we'll start with revenue, because while much of the discussion in the development of budget is about expenditures, its underpinning is revenue. We're going to discuss with you this evening where we stand with real and personal property, other local revenues, state revenues, federal revenues, and we'll touch on some fund revenues as well. The good news, to the extent that there is some, is that the governor's proposed budget did not do any significant negative damage to our state level revenue that we receive as a city. 2 pieces of additional information. One of the reasons is because they've sort of taken the money away from cities so much already that there's very little left to come after. And I would note that while we have not seen in the governor's budget a significant reduction in state revenue, it may well be that some of our shared services, such as CSA and social services, may well. In addition to that, the school system, we'll talk about it later, is expecting a significant reduction in state aid for yet another year. Our federal revenue, from an ongoing perspective, is very, very small. It hasn't changed. It is. We are not federal government dependent. Our characteristics of our community just don't match up to the types of monies that cities specifically would typically access for services outside of school divisions.
Do you want us to ask questions as we go through here, or do you want to just go straight through the presentation?
However you'd like to do it. I'm comfortable either way.
When you say state revenues largely unchanged by the governor's budget, does that include the school system?
No, sir.
Okay.
School systems estimates that the impact of the governor's budget on the school system is negative $900,000.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're cognizant of that. It does not include, which represents 50% of our, or 40% of our budget.
Yes, sir. With respect to other local taxes, our collection rates remain strong, and so what we're looking at is very small changes in the additions to the real estate tax base. We may see some small additions as well, expect to, in personal property. Cash for clunkers is still a positive wave that wave through our revenues stream. That will eventually dissipate, and it probably will with this estimate, but we've still got a little bit more to it. So overall, our revenue situation is slightly better than flat, and is, given where we've been and where the other communities are in Virginia, that is a significant achievement in and of itself. However, there is one very large caveat to what I just said, and that has to do with reassessment of real property, which we'll get to. I'm going to move on to slide 8. Next month, we expect to have, for the first time, a fairly firm value on reassessment. We expect that the overall reassessment will be in a downward trend, and that will set up a situation that is new to the city, in which we'll be talking about the concept of an equalized tax rate, whereby the tax rate would need to go up in order to achieve the same level of revenue stream that we had in the current year. That's not unique to us, but it is unique for us in that this has never been the case in the city of Poquoson before. On slide 7, just mostly for the folks watching at home, I tried to put together a slide that shows you it's a very simple slide, what I meant by what I was just saying. What we did here is we just picked a hypothetical overall reassessment number of minus 10%. There's nothing special about that number. Don't read anything into it other than the fact the staff believes it will be a negative number, but we just use 10 because it's a pretty easy mathematical concept. If you look at the first row going across, what you see is the current fiscal year, our total assessed value of real property and the land that it sits upon, our current tax rate, and our current collection rate. That's current collections. In any first year of collection, 98% is a real good collection rate. We do go after the rest, but we don't get it in the first year. And you'll see that for the purposes of the adopted budget, that brings us to a real estate yield in the budget of $13,652,000. If we take that same basic math, but we change the reassessment value, the assessed value of property, by that theoretical 10%, you see what happens. The value of the property goes down. You apply the same tax rate and the same collection rate, but instead of getting 13.6 million, you're at 12.2. So in order to bring that revenue stream simply back to where it began, in this example, the variable that needs to change, since the taxable value has changed and the collection rate is projected to remain unchanged, is the tax rate itself. And you'll see here in this mathematical calculation of this theoretical 10% reduction that would require a rate of 90 cents. That's 90 cents that yields no more overall revenue than we have in the budget right now. Everything that we talk about, that I talk about revenues being flat, that's a huge assumption that it's all at the equalized tax rate. That's something, a planning assumption that I can make, but that is a decision that ultimately you will need to decide on as part of this budget process. To the extent that the budget incorporates it, then you know where our revenue stream stands, which is slightly improved from a revenue standpoint. To the extent that the tax rate is not equalized, it will come off at whatever the new penny equivalent is. Right now it's $170,000. Based on this mathematical formula, it'd be about $153,000. So you can see the impact of that, and this is probably one of the two biggest decisions that face you going into the next budget process.
So is the math $1.3 million? Is that what it is?
A little more than $1.3 million.
Okay.
And when, I know you're getting ready to go to the next slide.
Yes, sir.
On the key reassessment dates. When will you know what this true number is, not the 10% example?
We expect to have a number in mid-February that is pretty solid for budget purposes. There are still appeal processes that citizens can go through, so we'll have to estimate that and reserve it in the mathematical calculation. But by the time that the recommended budget comes to you, we should have a pretty solid number.
Okay.
For the folks at home, and as a reminder to the council members, you see on the next slide some of the key dates for the reassessment process going on now. When the reassessment notices will be mailed in mid-April. The assessor hearings will be in May from the 9th to the 20th, and then Board of Equalization hearings are in July from the 11th to the 22nd. As a reminder to persons that may want to appeal their assessment, you can do it with the assessor, with the Board of Equalization and the Circuit Court. Those options are not mutually exclusive. You can choose option A and C, or just B, or all three. The first two are things that you can do on your own. If you go to Circuit Court, you would likely be advised to at least consider advice from an attorney. But that is the third process.
But the assessment would be, what I'm hearing here, because I want to make sure we're not dealing with a split year situation. The assessment would be for the taxes to be collected in June of this year.
To be collected following July 1st.
Following July 1st.
The city, you have a very favorable calendar for this, and most counties do not.
Okay.
July 2011, you mean?
The first collection would be in December of 2011, to be followed by June of 2012.
So basically, we're dealing with what could be a mid-year split. In other words, we're going to get half of the money, half of the budget, based on the current assessment rate.
No, sir.
No.
I may have said it backwards. If I did, I apologize.
What's going on
No.
currently?
Because our fiscal year runs July 1st to July 1st, and these values will be established as of July 1st.
As of July 1st.
Our first collection will be in December of
Okay.
2011.
Okay.
So, and that's
It'll
in
be a whole year.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure it wasn't like,
Every other place that I have worked, we have had a difference between a taxable year and a budget year, and the example you just described makes it very difficult to budget. The city, when you all thought this up in the charter, somebody was thinking ahead. This is the right way to do it, in my view.
okay.
We just want to tell you a little bit about another thing that we continue to work on, an idea that we continue to discuss with Mr. Green is this concept of moving some or all of our fee-based revenue stream into the general tax rate. And one of the things that appears to be something that you would want to have as you decide that is a state code change that would allow you the flexibility, or allow us the flexibility, to separate, if you so desired, a different real property rate on land versus improvements. It is my understanding that Senator Miller is indicated a willingness to patron that legislation in this session, and if that is something that the council would like us to do, we've been asked to simply confirm with the senator's office tomorrow that that is something the council is interested in, and he will put the final signature on that bill and get it in before the session starts.
And he is indeed prepared to do that if council with a consensus says we'd like to have that done.
Need the consensus.
Carrie's also had conversation with Mamie Locke, and she supports it.
She said if it came up, she would.
And it's my understanding that should this pass, that gives us the authority to do it, not necessarily that we will.
That's
Right,
correct.
right.
Because in some conversation I've had with Graham, we can already tax unimproved property, okay, differently than improved property with the existing ordinances and regulations that we have. There's some defined differences in there. This gives us a little more flexibility in our choices, I think, if you go that way. But we can already tax at different rates if we want to.
I'm in support of that. Do you need that here, or is that in the next meeting?
If there is no objection, I'll simply indicate that. I don't think we need a
I'd like to
resolution.
discuss it for a minute because the conversations that I've had indicated that we already do have the ability, if the purpose, assuming the purpose is to collect money from landowners differently than the money from improved properties, we do have the ability to do that by designating them either open land or agriculture, is that correct?
Or forest.
And they would be assessed differently. So we already have done that, and I'm just hesitant to ask Senator Miller to do something that I think that the legislature might come back and say, no, because you can already do that.
Mrs. Crawford, I think what we're talking about is the use value taxation program, which is established under state statute,
Right, that we can
which
do
we
that.
have the option to do. There are
Right.
certain parameters pertaining to open space, horticulture, silviculture, and the properties would need to be part of that. need to be eligible. But if you had a vacant lot or 3 lots in a subdivision, they would not be. So this is an
They
approach
could not be
that's
designated open land?
right, because they wouldn't meet the acreage requirements, nor would they be in a long-term hold situation.
I think there's an
necessarily.
income as well, isn't it?
There is an income for farming activities. You have to show a minimum of $1,000 from direct farm income from the property per year. That's part of the eligibility requirements that the commissioner would have to enforce. So we have some options that would get at certain types of property. But if we were interested in getting it, just making a differentiation between vacant property of any kind and property that has improvements on it, this is a different way to get them all. It's one way to get them all.
So this gives us more options, okay? Not necessarily we're not deciding which options we may or may not entertain right now, but
I'm not sure.
it gives us the option to differentiate between a vacant lot in the middle of the big woods versus one in the middle of
Let's
a
have,
subdivision.
let's have
Is that
Graham
right?
come up here, because obviously he's kind of fed some information in here. But I don't know of any way that this would excuse property in the big woods today.
Randy hit on it already. I mean, it's
This gives us the option
land
to do it.
use. It's the land use program. If city council wanted to enact an ordinance for us to have a land use program, we have that option available to us now. But it depends upon what council's intention is. If you want to build a tax, all land and all homes at different tax rates, like my house taxed at a rate, but my land taxed differently. You cannot do that now, and there's nothing that could be done to allow for that, unless you got Senator Miller and the General Assembly to enact legislation. However, if the intent is solely to tax land, vacant land, differently than improved land, if the criteria of that property allows for it, like Randy was touching on, through the land use program, then we can enact an ordinance which allows us to do that.
But we're miles away from that, because what I heard here was that deals with agriculture and silviculture and
Horticulture
and
and open
Open
space.
open space.
And if I look at the big woods and its current zoning today,
Right.
it's R&D and business.
And the zoning won't matter. The zoning, it has to do with use, and it could be considered open space. Is that not correct?
I'm not sure on that, to be honest.
Because I know there's an agricultural zone
Yeah.
that is not invoked anywhere that I'm aware of in the city. There may be one small place here or
One
there.
of the
but-
two ways that you can qualify for open space is to be in an agriforestal district. And that's an automatic qualifier.
A what?
An
In an agricultural
agricultural district.
Right.
The other is simply to meet the criteria. And I'm doing this a little off the top of my head. I'm sorry, but there's a minimum acreage requirement for open space, and you need to then pledge to hold the property vacant or unimproved for a period of time. And if you develop it prematurely, it's subject to rollback taxes.
So what
it's a
I'm
very-
not seeing is a way to do anything unless we rezone. Because I
It
don't
would be
think
rezoning.
I don't think you're going to run into I don't think they're going to let you rezone village commercial zoning as agricultural property. You can't just make that call.
Yeah, no,
We're going to
it would
have to
be-
rezone it
I don't think
piece
you
by
have to do
piece.
with rezoning. I think it would have to be deemed open space. And open space could be such that the city council would decide that this property would be in its best interest of the community as large to remain as open space.
But we wouldn't do that for a property owner. The
the
property
property
owner would
owner
have to
came to
come
you,
to us,
then you-
which
exactly.
would be like a year process.
It would take some time. Yeah, it would take some time. So, but yeah, that it would. I hesitate to get involved in the agricultural discussion
I do
because
too.
the agricultural discussion is. I don't think we have any property here that's being
I
currently
don't
used
either.
to farm. So I think the one thing that would would meet the land use qualifications would be open space. And there wouldn't be any rezoning necessarily involved. It would be basically this land is in the best interest of the city to be left open. And because we don't want to develop anymore, because we don't feel like development is in the best interest of the city, we're going to encourage it to stay open for that reason. And so you have that, but you can't do that now unless you pass a local ordinance.
But the state allows that.
The state
And-
does
and
allow
I-
that.
And I
Really
found the note that says open space is defined it has to be 5 acres minimum.
One of
We
the-
have very few of those.
One of the things that you have to think about is what the purpose of the tax policy is. If the purpose of the tax policy is to incentivize properties not to develop, certain types of properties, the land use taxation is worth doing. If the purpose of the taxation policy is to redistribute how revenue is collected, then this other bill that might be patroned by Senator Miller is a better way to go. And nothing in this bill's passage would preclude your ability to adopt land use, nor require you to adopt a segregated rate.
Agree, and that's what I'm looking for, and I think that the purpose of what, Buddy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the purpose of what you're looking for here is trash collection and sewer operations, solid waste service and sewer operations apply strictly to the home, and it's not driven by the vacant lot.
Right. The biggest argument against rolling the fees into the property tax was that you're now requiring property owners that don't have a house, just land, to pay for two services they're not going to get. So in order to equalize that, you've got to be able to tax them differently. I just think that any tool that we can get that would benefit the citizens is something we should go for. There are two cities now that have this ability. I think Randy, it's Roanoke and Fairfax.
Yes, sir.
And even if we don't roll the fees into it, we may find that would be a tool we could use to benefit the citizens for some other reason.
Regardless of the topic, I think anytime we can bring stuff from the state level to the local level, I'm all for it.
I don't disagree with that statement, Carrie, but I do think we should have a discussion first about why we want to do it, because when I go through the, what really would be the result if we were to have this new ability to tax things differently, I keep coming up with it helps the landowners, but it doesn't benefit the citizens, most of them.
Well, that depends on how you base that. What I'm saying is, I know that landowners don't require sewer operations for vacant land.
Which I don't want to roll that into the property tax. That's a different discussion.
And solid
But I think we
waste,
should have first.
they don't require trash services
And we're not
for
billing them for that.
vacant land.
We're not billing them for those right now.
Agree.
Right.
So if we equalize this out, which I think is what it would benefit the homeowners for, is far and above in that they would at least they would be paying equivalent dollars, but they would be able to write it off their taxes.
Some of them will be paying equivalent dollars. Some of them would be paying more, some might be paying less. But they would be able to write it off if they itemize. So I think we need to have that discussion first.
That's the part for another discussion.
Yeah, that's a different discussion.
And they've
I
done a
agree.
lot of work already.
Right.
But the fact that the General Assembly has to turn their bills in by tomorrow at 11 o'clock, if we can get this in our little toolbox
Agree.
by tomorrow, whether we use it or not, it's to our advantage.
So what Carrie said, which is any tool that we can make decisions down here, unlike the Dillon's rule where we can't make any decisions down here. This is a great tool for our toolkit, and what we do with it in the future is different.
And I don't disagree with bringing things locally. I'm fine with moving that far, but I do think that it's heading down a path that we're not going to choose to take.
Well, we may
I
not.
We may
I just
not.
want to put
May
that out
not.
there, but I also worry a little bit about taking Senator Miller's time. But if he's ready to sign it and it's already written up for something that I don't think it'll pass, because I don't think we need it. And I don't know that Roanoke and Fairfax are actually using it, are they?
They're not at this time.
They have it,
But they have the authority.
They have the authority.
Right.
I just, that's all we're looking for, I think, is the authority to be able to do it right now.
Yeah, I don't know, you
If it
don't ever,
doesn't pass in this session,
I'm hoping
it may
there's
pass in the
legislation.
longer session next year. I mean, we only got, 45 days this
Right.
time? So there's not going to be a lot.
I'm hoping this legislation is based on the same approval in two very good cities within our Commonwealth, and that we can piggyback on, hey, they've got it, why can't we?
Yeah.
So,
Well, the
no.
intent of them was to charge more for the open land.
Whatever they chose to do
Well-
with it, just like us, I don't know what Roanoke's doing,
Yeah.
but
I'll,
Okay, I think we have,
As
But
far
that's a
as-
different
right,
discussion.
it is, and I think
far
we
as-
need to have that
As
discussion.
far as
Later.
wasting Senator Miller's time, when he called me back 10 minutes later, he already had the lawyer writing the bill. So it's written. He's just waiting for us to say the majority of council like to move
I
forward.
think we have an entire consensus, quite frankly. I think
I'm
everybody.
okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So let's tell them first thing in the morning. We're ready to move forward.
I spoke to Matthew James on Friday night. He's from the city of Suffolk, and he's in the House of Delegates, and he would also work with John Miller on this, and Mamie also. I mean,
that's great. And it answers one of the pleas that we got from that podium right there from the landowners, saying, why am I paying for some of the stuff? It allows us to start making decisions down the road and putting taxes on services where they truly apply.
Okay, I think we're done with that one.
All right. The next slide, don't want to spend as much time on this as you'd like. We looked, as you know, at the idea of formally moving to a quarterly billing process. We could do it. That's the first thing. We could do it. It will cost us more money than we will make. And in the first year, because the interest environment is so low, we'll have a little bit more money for a little bit more time. But when we put that out against the cost of the billing and the postage, it would be a modest cost to do it. The biggest issue that we came up against is just because of the timing of the land book and the billing. It'll be sort of like when you implemented the tax collections twice a year for real estate. The first year you can only get in 3, and in fact each year you'll be challenged by that. And it could be done, but I guess my suggestion is that since we are not in a fund balance perspective, that we're living day to day, that really this is a change that doesn't take us really towards our cash flow objectives now that you've adopted a policy and we're within that policy. So it might be an idea to hold off in some future date until we needed it. We certainly can and plan to increase the way that we communicate with folks about their options in billing themselves. People have the ability right now to pay on almost any rational schedule they'd like to. Monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, we can do it, but we need to do a better job of letting people know that. So when we send out the tax bill, we're going to send out something that explains that. If you would prefer to budget it this way, we can take it that way, and see what we can do to help. So I think we can help the citizen that wants flexibility without changing the system at this point.
Yeah. That was the intent of my discussion on that subject was I just want more public knowledge out there so that, and give them your bill pay address. The electronic media that you go on and pay your bills with today, it's easy enough to just throw $100 or whatever at your taxes so that at Christmas time, it's not such a crunch between taxes and the Christmas holiday season, which causes a lot of people a lot of disconsternation.
there's always the option of credit cards, but that doesn't help a person either because he's got to pay the interest on that.
And it would help us if they were paying a little along and that.
But it would not help the taxpayer.
No.
Well,
It would help me. I get cash back, and I pay it off every month. So
yeah, I think you would find that there are a lot of people that don't know that they can do that, and
Right.
they would like to.
Credit cards?
I've had a lot. Anyway,
And anytime.
pay it anyway,
And
so
anytime.
that they're paying incrementally and not
Right.
all of a sudden 2 times a year they've got to write a big check.
Well, we still have a city newsletter that we put out, don't we?
We haven't had a
city newsletter in a while?
We cut that out prior to my arrival.
I think with their tax bills, the right time to do that, to say, look.
Put a little note in there. Yeah.
That's our intention, unless you all would like us to pursue it further.
You're on top of it, man. You're on top of it.
Well, you're trying, sir, because I have real good staff. They're on top of it.
Absolutely, no question about that.
Water
Just
flows downhill.
a couple of notes about our larger funds. The good news in the sewer fund is that in the coming fiscal year, we think we've got sufficient funds between what's coming in and what's in our reserves to meet our requirements. The other note, and this isn't something that you don't already know, come 2013, when we have to begin to actually implement the significant pieces of the consent order, we've got a funding challenge ahead of us. And you'll see more of that in the CIP, which is coming to you next month. But in short term, that fund is solvent. The solid waste fund, as you will recall, we had adopted the budget based on a concept that we were going to have a minor fee increase. Council reconsidered that and decided to use some retained earnings in the fund, and so we got through this year without them. But we have the same structural deficit in the fund going into next year, but we've used up our reserve. So we're looking at the likelihood of asking you to consider some version of the same fee increase that at least was conceptually discussed in the current year's budget. And the general fund support, just to tell you that it's continuing, for the Parks and Recreation Fund, the pool is a very large item. We do not make enough revenue, direct revenue, to support it, and through the general fund, we subsidize Parks and Recreation about $80,000, and that will likely continue.
Is it all for the pool, or scattered about?
It's not all for the pool. Pool's the biggest item, but the fields and other things are also subsidized. What we charge the users is not sufficient to make our costs. And
That's been the case, I think, since I've been on council.
it has
always
been, but it's
lost
almost
money.
doubled in the last 2 fiscal years.
It's just getting more and more expensive as we turn.
Well,
Kinda
and
like
I don't
healthcare.
think the equipment in the pool, I think it's hanging on by a thread too, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
I mean, we could be faced with a major expense in replacing
Yes, sir.
pumps and stuff like that. But you can't charge a family exorbitant amount of money to use the pool either.
Because it would get worse.
Yeah, it'll get worse.
That's
Because of
absolutely
less
right.
usage. Yeah,
Because if you raise the fees, they won't come at all.
That's right.
Then nobody enjoys it, and you can't pay for your expenses. So we try to strike the balance, but right now we're subsidizing the fund a little bit, and that will likely continue.
But let me
Randy,
add-
what was the figure you said that?
The total amount of subsidy from the general fund to the parks fund in the current fiscal year is $80,800.
What would it take, and you don't have to answer this tonight, just you can take a note. I'd like to know what the pool costs. In other words, how many more dollars are in the memberships of the families if we just open the pool to the general citizenship? What would it cost us?
You just open it to the citizens without charge?
we charge them $1 to get in or something.
Yeah, I
like
mean,
that.
are we talking about
minimum
there's
fee.
another $20,000 there, and you increase your use, and therefore you get better bang for your buck, or is it that they pay an equivalent to the 80,000, which I have a hard time believing. So are we talking 10, or are we talking 80,000? What's that number?
Well, I think one of the things too, Gene, is that the pool gets a heavy usage in June and July. Then when the doggiest days come to August, attendance drops off a lot, I believe. I mean, and that's, maybe we could cut back hours and cut back staff in the month of August and September. I mean,
Is it gate receipts, or is it family passes that drive what you're taking in?
The family passes I'm doing this from memory, but I believe they're the more significant of the two. Why don't you let me put those financials in the weekly report for you? I actually looked at a version of the same question last week, because I was. At what point do you just say if you can demonstrate you're a Poquoson resident, you're just welcome to come in?
Right.
And so I'll have that for you this week.
Okay.
we used to bring in a lot of York County youth also to swim, or families.
Well, we'll get their dollars.
At a different price. $1 more maybe, or something like that. But they have nowhere else to go. Unless they have live in the Coventry. Or,
I was thinking if we got rid of that, maybe we see Gordon down there at the pool.
Well,
That's a good idea.
I don't know that using tax money to support recreation facilities in the city is a bad use of our
No.
tax dollars. I think that's pretty good use.
So let's see what it costs us, though.
I'll have it all for you on Thursday. Moving on.
Let me make a comment, so I don't have to make this, and since we're televised, folks know about it anyway, but there were some questions regarding, there is one donor who made a sizable pledge to the football stadium. That person has now fulfilled their commitment, and we're just waiting. I don't know what Teresa went. We're just waiting to hook the two together, and they would like to do that on a monthly basis rather than a yearly basis. So just so everybody knows that that's about to begin, and I think everybody else is already made their donations for the year. So I think that's right. Seemed like a good place to interject that.
The next two slides speak to the fund balance as we begin to transition from revenue to expense. This is so that you know what we know, and for the people that may be following along with us, there's a little bit of additional background. City Council adopted a financial policy which says that we will maintain an undesignated general fund balance between 12 and 15% of general fund expenditures. Based on, and also that we would begin to build a stability reserve outside of that number of $1 million. That did not have a specific roadmap as to when or in what increments to do so. The policy also provides some guidance as to what might be an appropriate use of fund balance to include one-time capital needs, offset expenditures during a fiscal emergency, non-recurring expenditures, liquidity in emergency situations, financial opportunities that would be in the well-being of the city, or in instances of a state budget shortfall. As we move towards this upcoming budget, what we know is that we anticipate, barring any significant change, at the end of this fiscal year, we project a undesignated fund balance of 19.02%. This is, council members will recall, this is a report that Teresa updates on a monthly basis, and you see how it changes, so that you didn't have to do the math yourself. Using the 15% guideline as the basis of calculation, there is $917,000 in that fund beyond the 15% level. That is something that I knew I'd get questions about, and I just wanted to put the information out there. You know what is there. It's one-time money. It came in largest bulk in the last year from expenses that we didn't have to make.
And that's very good, Randy. I'll tell you my experience in now, how many years we've been here together, Gordon?
Long time, bud.
12 to 14 years that it's always done this. And I guess if we could find what the true budget number has to be, but I've always seen it swing, these major swings. This one is probably more extreme than I've seen in the past. To go to have a 19% of the budget sitting there without a purpose, probably not real great policy, because it's the people's money. And, you know, when it's the people's money, we're the stewards of that. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely on the table for when we do the next budget. You know, it's not good policy to continue to collect taxes to put in a savings account. That's not what governments do.
In fact, not only is it not good, I think it is absolutely bad.
It is. And, you know.
I don't think you can collect taxes and have surpluses with it.
Well, and that's the thing is, you know, you could sit there and go, well, that's $17,000. We could do some good thing. Well, you know, it's $917,000 that somehow or another we didn't figure in that last budget. Because when we did the last budget, we were all here arguing about whether we were going to violate the 12% number, if I recall. We were all arguing about whether we were going to hit that 12% number, and here we are sitting at 19, 7% above that, at the tune of almost $1 million of budget, which is several pennies of taxes. So we just need to, I guess I need to understand exactly how we got that 917.6. What didn't we do?
Teresa, you want to address that?
How we got to the $917,000?
What didn't we buy?
What were the factors that drove the increase?
One of the factors was the increase in the personal property, which we hadn't anticipated 18 months before we actually were able to get that. That was about $300,000. In the police and fire department, I believe they had vacancy savings of about $200,000 to $300,000 as well, somewhere around 200. And the other ones were some other expenditures that we didn't need, but the big bulk of it was personal property and vacancy savings.
Well, and I don't say that in taking away from staff. Let me make that clear. The fact that we operated the city for less than we budgeted is a good thing.
It's a good thing.
And the fact that we're prudent with our hiring, if that's what's driving the number, and that we're filling vacancies when we absolutely have to have them, that's good policy. So don't take what I'm saying as negative. What I am saying is that because we have $917,000 of the people's money, doesn't mean we need to go off and spend it for something else.
No.
Or to hold it while we tax them at the same rate. And that's all I'm saying, is that we've proved that we can run less. You continue to challenge yourself on that downward trend.
Are those vacancies in the police and fire department still exist, or have they been filled?
Largely been filled. The thing with the vacancies is we had a pretty tough year last year with workers' comp injuries. We had a number of people that were out for good portions of the year, and that's really the bulk of the money. It wasn't that we made a conscious decision to slow down hiring. I mean, it takes a while to hire these people, but we had a number of people that were out significant portions of the year. And when they're on workers' comp, workers' comp is paying them when we're not. And so these were salary savings that regrettably we got due to the injuries of our people more than anything else.
So it wasn't vacancies per se,
It wasn't a conscious attempt to hold vacancies. We'd already reduced staff the previous year.
Yeah.
And, we try to move as quickly as we can to fill them when we have them. But police and fire positions, by their nature, take a longer time to fill because they have to go through a more exhaustive process of screening.
And you can't replace a person on workman's comp with another
Correct.
body.
That's
He's
right.
on the books
That's
for until he's back on the job, or else he's
That's right.
medically unable to perform or whatever.
That's correct. But I agree with the point that certainly that this is $917,000 of the people's money and should be approached not as a windfall or not in search of some new widget, but as part of the overall financial equation of the basic operations of the government. And that's why we presented it as the bridge from revenue to expense. This level of reporting and projecting is not something, this is relatively new to the city. We continue, I think, to get better at it. But every month you have our updated best estimate. And that's something that Teresa takes the lead on with me every month.
But the point is that, at least as I see it, that it is there to use at the city's discretion. And for those out there who, watching this tonight that don't totally understand, and believe me, I don't totally understand, the impact of them is if you were to use that money in terms of taxes only, you just dropped your first page from 9 cents to maybe 2 cents.
The important thing to think about there is that you could use it in any one year to lower the tax rate, provided you raised it right back up the following year.
Right, realizing it's one-time money.
And
I understand.
That's the concern of substituting one-time money for.
But then if we used it for a capital improvement project that is way overdue, way past due, and we've got some dangerous situations in our city that some of that money would certainly correct.
Yes.
Or you could go somewhere in between.
Yeah. But I think it's comforting to know that it's there, and I think it's a salute to your staff that it's like that.
Or the other thing that would benefit the taxpayers is what if we paid that down on one of our debts?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, that's good.
I think, as Gordon said, if anyone who hasn't been down to some buildings in Poquoson, namely Public Works,
It's awful.
that is awful. That is really, really, that's in need of complete overhaul, in my opinion.
Well, I agree with you.
Well, I brought that up the last 3 budget discussions, that we needed that Public Works building.
Yeah, we talked, what, 600,000 you said for some kind of
and
a
that's
building
the-
with storage and whatever?
I would just hope that we would finance that for the life of the building, because in general terms, when you buy a building that's good for 30 years, it's good for 30 years of the debt service. In other words, you're
That's
paying
fine.
as you use it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you reduce it, but if you look at some of your interest rates that you have on school loans.
School debts, yeah.
And when we know that we have looming school shortfalls, I'm just wondering if it isn't good policy to knock that out and then potentially even refinance again and look at what does that do for your budget. If you may be at historic low rates and you're not going to do any better, but
We are planning, we are examining whether or not there's one more refinancing to do. And we anticipate actually bringing you something on the 24th that will answer that question, yes or no, with our
Great.
financial advisors. And
if you need these dollars to make something like that help, then I think I would be open to that discussion. I can't imagine anybody else wouldn't be, but it could really make a big difference. It could make the same difference that Gordon's talking about by instead of a direct return.
But these dollars,
Just a comment, you know.
Go ahead.
In learning about the budget last year, I ran a bunch of graphs, and even though at the end of the year, we wind up having a general fund with the surplus between the 12 and 15%, okay? There are a couple of times a year where we went just about to zero in our budget, and there was no money there, okay? And so it's not like it's that much money sitting there all the time, all year long. That just doesn't happen, okay? The other thing is, with the public knowing that they may be able to, or they can pay their taxes in advance now, they can pay it by the month or quarterly if they want to, so they don't have to have a large tax payment at Christmas time. Then if that money starts coming in advance, so we don't really wait till June and July to get it, okay, that might make this better. We may be able to handle those finances better.
we still have the 15% sitting there. This is at 4% above 15 to 19.
The 917 is the difference between 19% and 15%?
Yes, sir.
Right. We still got the 15% cushion in addition to
the
that.
15% level will address the issue Mr. Southall's talking about.
Okay.
It's when we begin to go below that, and we may need to someday, that's when we really need to focus on that cash flow.
And this is in excess of that, right?
Yes, sir.
And this is also about the same amount of money we were projecting the school was going to be short.
That's
Might be
correct.
something to keep in mind.
That's correct.
This is also the same amount of money that we said we'd have $1 million set aside for a rainy day.
Yeah, but that's part of the 15, not in excess of it.
That's an addition as to your policy. But you're right, it's a very similar number to the school's number, but the difference is the school's issue is recurring, and this money is not. But that's something that you will have to decide what's best on if we could maybe turn to expenditures. I just wanted to share with you a couple of things that we know are coming. One is, you'll recall, prior to my arrival at the city, you all restructured some debt to give you some flexibility in what were year 1 and 2 from that time. Well, we are now in year 3, so that stair step is coming. So in next year's budget, based on your existing debt profile, your debt service will be going up by $381,000. In addition to that, and I've got some new, better information, but the slide indicated that what we had heard from our insurance consultant was to expect a premium increase of 20 to 30%, based in large measure to a very significant negative claims experience in the previous year. Got this afternoon at 3:45 some updated information. Yet another month calculated in, and we challenged him to go back and make sure that his formulas are right, his assumptions are right, and we got some good news today. If you want to couch it as good news, the now projected increase in health insurance has dropped from 20 to 30% to a range of 12 to 20%. So it's going down. We'll be meeting with our health insurance consultant this week to talk about things that we can do to maybe pull that number down further. Significant driver in the budget, even at the 20% rate, let's say, which is the maximum sort of the current range. That's $300,000. That's $300,000 essentially for a service we already get, requiring more money that we don't easily have on an ongoing basis. So if you sort of start adding these things up again, these are the kinds of things that weigh and compete for any monies that we do have. Then we
Randy,
have.
can I interrupt? I have one question about additional expenditures. Didn't we balance this year's budget because we didn't fund, was it the teachers' retirement system? We didn't fund some retirement fund. How much was that we did not? We're gonna owe it back.
We did everything we were supposed to do. The state balanced its budget by reducing the amount of its contribution for its own employees and for teachers. And then they passed that on to school systems as well. In the coming budget, part of the $900,000 problem that the schools have is the beginning of that shift back towards what they should be depositing. Because when the state decides what the rate is for teachers, that translates over to what school divisions have to do as well. So it's a significant portion of that number. But it's
again,
nowhere near what it needs to be.
That's the state, not the locality.
The locality did exactly what it was supposed to do. In fact, we didn't even have an option not to.
Correct.
While the state balanced its budget by changing the way it made contributions for its employees and for school division employees, it left local government unchanged. So they didn't help us in the short run, but longer term, from a fiscal health standpoint, we're much better served.
And I guess that health insurance number is equally important on the school funding paragraph below.
Yes.
Because, again, you're talking the city employees on the 20 to 30%, which
That's
has now
correct.
been reduced 12 to 20. But in the school, they have that same driver in what they will request as their budget number.
They do have health insurance as one of their drivers. Their experience is different than ours and rated separately. I have no idea what their percentage is, but
It's normally
But
higher,
you're-
isn't it? I think.
it really depends upon the actual experience of the group. I hesitate to say, but they're 3 times bigger than us. So at a rate of 10%, that's going to get you in the same dollar value. So, and when I flip the page, I'll come back to that if I could. Things we don't know about are shared services, things that we do with regional jails, things that we do with social services and CSA and courts, and that's an area that is largely beyond our control.
A year ago, we talked about going back to York County and saying how York County has grown so much and Poquoson hasn't, and we're waiting for the results to come out for the census. Are the results out yet for the census?
No, but
Okay.
let me give you some more information along that line, if I could. You all certainly did say, let's see what we can do with York County. I sent a memorandum to the county administrator suggesting that with the new census, that perhaps we should go update the population numbers. The mayor and I actually met with the county administrator and the chairman of the board in Yorktown to further discuss that, and that was some time ago. And we've not heard anything back. Keep in mind that for them to agree to that, it's a court process, because these formulas are established through a court document. They would have to willingly change the arrangement in a way that wasn't advantageous to them financially.
Understand.
So,
And they can't do that because they don't have a judge assigned.
well, there's that also, I guess. But we have tried, we continue to try, but I
Understand.
think this
Okay.
is of more importance to us than it is to them.
Yeah, I don't think they want to pay more than they're paying now.
A very good point, though. I guess, Randy, I thank Frank for bringing that up. But definitely something you need to continue to say, hey, we'll follow up the letter that you sent them.
Yes, sir.
And see if we can drag them into the room.
It won't hurt.
Yeah, very good point.
We will keep at it. We talked about school funding, but I'll flip at the risk of flipping between 2 slides. The superintendent had provided this information, similar information that she provided to the school board. Again, the impact of the governor's budget, $900,000, impacts, some of which is a result of declining enrollment. But the larger pieces are the removal of the 50% hold harmless on the local composite index that was included in the governor's and the General Assembly's adopted budget for both this year and next year. And also, as Ms. Crawford was indicating, the beginning to get back to where they should have been contributing to the Virginia retirement system. Those are big drivers. There's also an impact in the current fiscal year. If memory serves, about $250,000 in negative news from the governor's proposed amendments to the budget. And the superintendent was quick to point out, as Mr. Hunt indicated, that those things like health insurance, utilities, and other mandatory drivers are not built into that $900,000 number. The school's real sort of hole that they need to fill likely exceeds $1 million, and I'm just not sure beyond that what it is. Two other issues as we sort of...
Well, they may need to fill it, but they do still have declining enrollment.
They do.
So they're going to have to take that into account in what they present to us.
Well, they've had declining employees to match the declining
Agreed.
enrollment too, so they've adjusted it
Agreed.
fairly
We'll make
well,
sure it
I think.
continues.
But the schools still have $500,000 in jobs money
You do.
and 300 and some odd in stimulus money.
They do.
Which they were very good to put away for this rainy day, because it's coming.
It's coming.
So, from that perspective, that's a pretty good thing. But it seems like the state's just walking away from education.
I think you're absolutely right. Council will recall there's a separate handout was in your package. Council will recall in August or September, following the decision that you all made with regard to the bonuses and the compensation adjustments for next year, you asked us to look at compensation generally. And what we did, we tried to do this with the staff we had, with the information we could get, without spending any money. We just spent time on it. And it's here for you, and I'll just summarize a few things. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you have. But generally speaking, we found what we expected to find, which is that in most instances, our salaries are at the lowest of the comparative group. Sometimes we have as many as 13 people we could find stuff to compare. Sometimes it was as little as 7. But generally speaking, we were at the lowest. We're also one of the best places to work and to be. That weighs against it. But essentially, these are things that the council already knows. We need to spend some time once the recession is over working to update our classification and pay plan. We know that. It's not within our financial ability to do that right now. But what is in our ability to do is to try whenever we can to match or exceed at least our close-in competitors, not to catch them per se, but to make sure that we're gaining on them. And what the city council did earlier in the year was a dramatic step forward at a time where others are not taking steps. So you have moved us forward on that continuum already. And the employees appreciate that, and as opportunities present themselves when funding is available, we need to just do what we can to chip away at it. We didn't get here, in a single year, and it will take us a long time to reach closer parity to the average. But the point is, it's a journey, and we just chip at it when we can, and we try never to lose ground. I think that's the first strategy. And one of the good things is your budget, our budget, comes out later than everybody else's, so we have the advantage of knowing what it is that the city manager of Hampton recommends and what the city council of Hampton is likely to do, and York and Newport News. So we operate with some information because of our calendar, and we'll just have to do the best we can. There were a few other things I just wanted to point out as we studied it. It's all in the report, but as we were interested in knowing how the recession and other things had affected our applicant pool. And our applicant pools are shrinking. I should say, they're not shrinking. The number of sort of highly qualified applicants within the pool is shrinking. The applicant pools are actually robust. For a secretarial job, we may have 70 applicants. They may not have any experience at all that's relevant, but there are a lot of people that want jobs. And fortunately for us, we've still found that we get a core number of very qualified applicants to choose from within that group. So right now, the applicant pool is good. We talked about job descriptions already. I did want to say that also our findings on employee residence. One of the things that makes this city as great as it is as a place to work and provide public services, the vast majority of our employees live here. They're part of this community, and that is not always the case in other places. And there are probably not too many places east of 95 corridor where 75% of your employees, or 70%, live in the city. And generally speaking, what we found, first of all, we're hiring fewer people, so the statistics are not what they used to be. But we'll keep watching this. You'll see in 2009, over 70% of our people either were city residents or became city residents. And we're not trying to track them simply were they city residents when they were hired, but did they subsequently relocate to the city? You'll see that's dropped somewhat, and something we'll continue to watch. It was 55% of new hires are residents. It says current residents. That means at the time of hire or subsequent to that. We'll continue to watch it, but one thing to bring to your attention affirmatively is we had a significant outlier in that our 5 police department hires all lived outside the city. If you took them out of the math, the trend was very similar to what we've seen. So that's something that is of concern for us, and something that we'll be planning towards some more.
Well, was there when you say that number, was there in your applicant pool, was that evident?
We didn't run that analysis.
You may want to check that.
But if you have 5 policemen living outside the city, and I don't know where they live, Isle Ride or wherever, that's a lot more wear and tear on our police cars.
I agree. I just want to make sure that it's not just a hiring policy, and the applicant pool is not suggestive of what you're getting. Could be that we went for the qualifications when you had the applicants from in the city. I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
In addition, we looked at one of the things you want to model is what's your turnover rate, and the information is here for you. If you take retirements out of the equation, where our turnover rate is routinely less than 10%, which is healthy, because people are going to retire and move away and things like that. That happens. And so nothing in our retirement suggests that we've got a big problem here. It's just something that we track to make sure. It's one of the things that tells you it's an early warning sign. The last thing here is I just wanted to bring to your attention that one of the things that we did is and I've done this every place I've ever been, you try to figure out how many of your people are sort of in that retirement class. And you generally do that by how many people are eligible for full retirement within the next 10 years, just to sort of get a sense of what that is. And our number is only 30%, which is actually real good. I know it's impacted by our early retirements we had, but still 30% is a pretty favorable number. If it's 50%, that might cause you to panic. But the thing that really concerned me is towards the middle of that paragraph, we began to break it down further. And really, half of that group of 36 people, it will hit full retirement age by next July. And in this group of people that is moving through in sort of a cohort, I think it's 5 department heads, the assistant city manager, and 5 other members of senior staff. So we stand. They may not all retire the day they're eligible. In fact, some of them haven't. But we're at that point that a huge number of people for us, it's all relative, with just a vast amount of experience in the city, some almost since the city began, are poised to leave us. And that's a special challenge for us because the way our departments are structured, there's not a whole lot of deputies, assistants, and others. So we have our work cut out for us to make sure that we are training the folks that will come behind us. I'm in the list too, by the way. To train those that will come behind us, to assume our jobs so that we'll have hopefully an applicant pool that can compete favorably with others for these vacancies when they come up. So succession management, that planning actually begins tomorrow at the senior staff meeting at 8:30. We really need to focus. That statistic scared me because these are some fantastic people with hundreds of years of combined service that will be difficult to replace. One other thing, if I could, as we sort of run out of time, Mayor, just wanted to share this with you. This shouldn't surprise you in any way, but the last slide, slide 16, shows you where our capital project. This is the CIP slide, and it really does two things on one slide. One, it talks to you about debt capacity, because in a normal municipal debt load, you pay level principal, so you have a declining interest over time, and your debt line sort of looks like this. Meaning, if you don't borrow any more money, you pick up a little bit of capacity, which is either used to reduce your expenses or to pick up a little bit of new debt. Because of the way our debt is structured, you'll see from this chart on 16 that we essentially have a flat debt load for several years. So there is no new debt service that's simply coming online by virtue of something being retired. You've taken advantage of that to smooth out your curve and to reduce the impact on operations and the tax rate already. That's a good thing. But just wanted to show you this flat line. The other thing, one of the things that local governments can do when they're in a difficult financial position is go to the CIP and look at ongoing cash in the CIP and lower that for a time. Well, we're down to zero. So I guess the point of this slide is to say that our capital fund and our debt load are not in a position to sort of positively contribute to helping with our issue, with the exception, of course, of that potential refinancing, which we'll have back to you in 2 weeks.
But what if we paid the $1 million? Would that change the slope of the curve?
It would depend. Yes, sir, it would. It would depend on what you wanted to defease with it.
Right. I'm saying it could change the slope of the curve down, in years about 4 and 5, I would think, where we're starting to, because now you're starting to apply principal payment instead of interest payment. And I'm just wondering if we should run that. Like I said, as we try and figure out what to do with the 917 or whatever it is, if that's not one option that we need to have studied and see if it changes and whether it helps us out 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, but I think it would change the slope of that curve quite a bit.
It would. We'll do that. That's one of the things when Davenport's here in 2 weeks that they can speak better to. They can tell you what things are callable and what the impacts of those things would be on that line.
How you spread it out.
And that sort of concludes what I had hoped to share with you. I think that we have a difficult road ahead, but we're on a firm foundation. And in terms of having some money in the bank, and the schools also at least have some potential to help with a portion of theirs, and that's some measure of good news. But they've got a difficult road ahead for them, and ours is probably no less difficult. But we'll work it through, and we'll have a budget for you on time. That'll include the reassessment, and you'll already know about the refinancing budget.
All right. Couple-minute break. Let's get cranked up.
He's